You may have heard about a radical plot to blow up downtown Toronto. It was foiled by police. But like so many stories about thwarted terror plots, it seemed to hit the news one day and all but vanish the next. Now, Muslims Against Jihad director and producer Martin Burke takes a closer look at the Toronto plot and finds new, disturbing information.
In June 2006, 17 men from Toronto were arrested in pre-dawn raids and charged with planning massive terrorist attacks.
This group posed a real and serious threat. It had the capacity and intent to carry out these acts.
These acts were, it was claimed, the use of huge quantities of explosives to set off a series of bomb blasts across downtown Toronto. According to police, one of the two ringleaders of the group was 21-year-old Fahim Ahmad, who not only met with the two men from Georgia who had videotaped locations in Washington, D.C., but also rented a car for two Somali-born Muslims who used that car to smuggle weapons into Canada. 21-year-old Fahim Ahmad regularly attended the large Saladin Mosque in suburban Toronto and confided in its outspoken imam, Ali Hindi, that he had rented a car for the two men smuggling weapons into Canada.
He came back to me around July of 2005, and he told me that he rented a car, he signed a car for two young people to go to U.S. And I said, why you signed for them? He said, because they are underage, he can't rent a car under 21. So, and then they went there to buy a gun to smuggle it to Canada. You know, so I said, this is illegal. This is,
In the forest north of Toronto, the locals began noticing something unusual in late 2005 and into the new year of 2006.
Did you hear any weapons?
Well, you heard some gunshots and that. Some of the neighbors said they had heard some automatic fire and things like that.
The area is a kind of boundary where the rich farmland of the south meets the granite formations of the Canadian north. It is an area more accustomed to hockey and hunting than to preparations for jihad. But it was here that a group of young men arrived at a time when the roads were usually impassable. At the center of the group was Fahim Ahmad. Mike Côte and his wife Chris own the heavily forested area 100 miles north of Toronto, where many of the 17 young Muslims who were arrested had trekked to, training themselves in survival techniques in the dead of winter. Young men led by those who were part of what was claimed to be a jihadist web that now stretched from Bosnia to Denmark to London, England to the Canadian north.
Well, lately, since this happened, we've called it Al-Qaeda Hill up here. It's kind of neat. This is where one of their main trails was coming into their little encampment. And basically their camp was just down on the bottom in here. And this is where they stood for nearly 2 weeks. I had a really small fire here. You can see there's hardly any remains of it at all. It's all cleaned up. This is, you can see how they bent that tree over there, and that's where they had their green tarp, and that's where they're kind of like they're all standing under there.
Less than 6 months after leaving this training camp, they were arrested in a flurry of publicity and chaotic court appearances that were to project an image of violence and destruction. And yet there were those who claimed genuine disbelief that these young men could ever have been led into such a plot. This video, a home movie made by a group of young Muslims in the suburbs of Toronto, satirizes the lengths to which they have to go to find a proper wife. The young man playing with such comedic flair the role of the prospective bride is Saad Khalid. Less than a year after this whimsical film was made, Saad Khalid was arrested, one of the 17 men charged with plotting to blow up downtown Toronto. His arrest raised anew the question, how do young Muslims like him get pulled into such violent forms of jihad?
Desperately seeking martyrdom.
For over a year, there had been signs that a problem had been surfacing in the Toronto suburb of Mississauga. Students there, like Ibrahim, observed many of these signs. His expertise in computer technology providing him with some of the clues.
Come on, bros. I need some jihad talks.
On his screen are a series of comments by one of the 17 arrested, made long before he was taken into custody. The online postings contained angry condemnations of the society around him as being opposed to Islamic law and jihad, and talked of a pent-up anger. It was an anger that began to concern others, the moderates, who tried to head off what they saw as the trouble that lay ahead. 3 of those arrested came from the same high school in Mississauga, an area where Ahmed Amruddin is a young Sufi sheikh counseling Muslim youth and attempting to steer them away from trouble, the kind that has been espoused by the radical Wahhabi and Salafist forms of aggressive Islam.
When I send them an email with all the proofs citing where their fallacies are, I was given a reply, which I have till today in my email, which was to the effect, "Who are you and why are you sending me this kind of filth? May God destroy you."
Moderates like Ahmed Amruddin are often caught between the suspicions of the mainstream population and the hostilities of the Islamic extremists.
Instead of saying that, Muslims should go back to their countries and all of this, well, if we went back to our countries, those guys wouldn't. And, good luck with them, because you need us here.
What is the attraction of this extremist form of Islam to these people?
The glory of the past, right? It's old glory. It's like, it's similar to maybe somebody that at one time in their life was really wealthy, right? And basically one of their forefathers lost all of their wealth. And they drive by one of their old houses in their neighborhood where they used to live. And, then they're told by somebody that, hey, you know what, I can move you back in here, but you're going to have to do 1 or 2 illegal things, and you can have this house back.
Amid all the suburban sprawl of Mississauga on the outskirts of Toronto, there is a debate going on among its large Muslim population. For moderates, like Ahmed Amruddin, there is the question of who is financing the big new mosques being built in their area.
You don't take aid from a bank. You don't take aid from a financial institution. Well, where are they getting their money for this?
Where?
It's coming from Saudi aid. And I've been screaming at our authorities here. I'm telling everybody, mosque officials, everybody, wake up, and you better basically make an effort to stop the rise of this type of Islam. And the only way to do it is, unfortunately, in my opinion, you have to put a stop to Saudi Arabia.
For the moderates in the Muslim communities, Saudi Arabian influence and funding is seen as one of the problems they face, because with it comes a strict Saudi or Wahhabi form of Islam. In the last Canadian election, Fahim Bukhari was a campaign manager for a Muslim member of the Canadian Parliament who had argued publicly against one of the 17 men who were later arrested on terrorism charges.
Most of the book, Islamic literature, even interpretation of Quran, the holy book of Islam, come in this country, they came from Saudi Arabia. You just go any mosque in Toronto. I'm not saying the management of the mosque deliberately buying to keep it in the mosque. Most of the Muslims, most of the mosques are run by moderate Muslim, or they're not subscribed to the violent or extremist ideology. But even in those mosques, you see the Quran, interpretation of Quran, books are supplied by Saudi government. Any mosque, almost.
By the Saudi government.
By the Saudi government.
On the major highway linking Toronto and nearby New York State is one of Canada's largest mosques. The bookstore in this mosque had the following material for sale: books by Kutub and Maududi, 2 of the founding fathers of the most aggressive anti-Western Islamic movements; numerous Wahhabi publications from Saudi Arabia on proper Islamic behavior; videos on various forms of jihad and political issues, including one on whether or not author Salman Rushdie should die for insulting the Prophet. It concluded that a case could be made for his death.
فنحن We do not accept people who disrespect our religion. We put our religion in front of ourselves.